Hello, happy Monday, happy week of Thanksgiving. I hope you are doing well. Those of you that are already off for break, I hope you are getting to spend time the way that you want to. And for those of us that are still working hard and not yet on holiday break, we can do it just a few more days. We can get there. I also want to express deep appreciation for you and everything you do, for your colleagues, for your students, for your community, for your districts, all of the things, as well as for yourself every day. It is a tricky field that we work in. It is a field that requires a lot of us. It asks us to give a lot to everybody. It is also a deeply rewarding field when it works. So I want to be one person to express appreciation to you and gratitude for all that you do. Okay, so now to what I want to talk about. I had amazing conversations this past weekend at the National Council for Social Studies Teachers Conference in Boston, Massachusetts. It was also so wonderful to be back in Boston as a human who grew up outside of Boston. It was hitting all my warm feels and helping me feel at home and all of those things. But we were doing some really cool activities on how we can really get kids engaged and working with data. So my colleague, Dr. Mary Curtis from University of Houston Clear Lake, had this great activity, Shirts, Shoes, and Watches, where we provided some data because, y'all, it was only a 55-minute session. So, man, it went by so quickly. So we provided some data, and then participants collected some of their own data to round out the data table. We were looking at different products that we had that were around. I'm looking for my phone, all of the things to try to figure out what was the product, where was it manufactured, thinking about how that fit into certain categories, sort of building out that ability to, yes, we collect data, but then we can categorize our data to look at it, as well as we have our location, our actual country for where things were manufactured, but we can also group those locations into a category. So building out, thinking about how do we help our students build that understanding of what actually is a variable? How do we think about that as it's a characteristic, and it's something that we can completely measure, identify, as in the product name or the country that product is from, but it is also something that we can create to assist us as we are making sense of the data. We can bin our products into groupings, into a product category, rather than just each individual item has its own name, or we can group our countries into, say, regions around the world, different pieces like that. So this was one aspect of how we were trying to pull our students in and get them, or talking about how we can pull our students in and get them to be thinking about the data a little more critically, a little more in the driver's seat, not just okay, I'm executing through, I'm recording these product numbers, I'm recording the locations they're from, just looking up this information, but then taking it that next step of, and then how might we want to look at that and visualize that? And we could absolutely graph these data on a more typical graph chart or plot, but we were really interested in thinking about how can we map those data? And so could we, therefore find the country name on a plot, and how this is actually a variable in and of itself. Our political boundaries for our countries are a variable in our data set. We had that identified here in our data table in terms of the manufacturing country, but then helping our students make this connection of this map where we color every country by the political boundaries. We often just look at that as that's just a map that's telling us where the countries are. When in fact, this is a choropleth map, because we are shading the regions of the country based on the country name. So this is a variable that we have. So this is one variable that we could look at. But we also talked about maybe there are different variables that we want to interplay. Maybe we want to look at the data that we had and overlay it with a sense of, are the nations developed, developing, different things like that. We talked about it for what affordances we have by focusing in on any particular region versus looking across the entire globe and plotting our data on it across the entire globe, or maybe the categories of developed, developing, least developed actually don't offer that much nuanced reality for what it means boots on the ground, or like just actual feet on the ground for humans living across all those different countries. So then we also talked about the Human Development Index, which prompted this great other conversation of the benefit of using indices and what they can afford us, kind of like the benefit of categorizing our data, not just going with the actual raw data where each case is totally different from one another. And so we thought about, human health index. So these pictures that I'm just showing, these maps that I'm showing you now, we had actually handed out in our session, and different groups got to make different decisions as to which map they wanted to use on any piece of paper. But they were assigned global versus regional. And then in our activity, what we asked them to do is we asked them to visualize their data. And I'm like trying to pick up all the beads off my desk, so bear with me for a moment. So we used like color pearl beads, right? This is, we can like find these. I pulled them out of my kids' arts and crafts drawer and to think about how do we visualize our data. So we had four groups in our product category. We provided 4 colors of beads. We did not provide enough of any one color, you'll notice. Well, so first off, there weren't enough colors for every single item to have its own color. So we had to go by the product groupings. We did not have to go by all 4. The groups did not have to choose that, but there was some choice in there of, okay, what color is going to represent what as we visualize the data on the map, because it's not just the variable of developing or developed or the Human Health Development Index or the political boundaries, but we wanted to look at the data that we had about the products and where they were manufactured a little bit differently. So that was one choice. They did not have enough colored beads for any one particular category, so they couldn't just like create a bar chart of these plots. And also we were trying to be like, put it on the map. Let's think about our spatial data. Let's take spatial data off of a table and integrate it with a map, thinking about these different variables, thinking about what this affords us in terms of talking about the data. So what I want to share, sorry, I should have pulled this up ahead of time, are some different visualizations that came out. So here's an example of one of the maps that folks were making where they took different colors. You can see their key here. So different colors represented those different category options in the product category variable that we had. And then they just put a bead in each country from where to represent the data in their chart. So they like looked through and like, if it had any one of those categories in that country, then they plotted a bead there. And what I want to share is like, this is awesome and fantastic and a great way to visualize the data, but there are other options that we have when actually we also use the 3-dimensional space. So here, let me zoom in a little bit as to what I did here is there were in fact 2 clothing shoe options that came in from China for this group. There were raincoats and shoes. So now I've got 2 pink beads here indicating that. So yes, we have our beads by color, by different category grouping, product category grouping, but we're also using the 3-dimensional space to indicate quantity. So similarly here in Thailand, we had 2 kinds of accessories that were coming out. So each of those kinds of accessories were noted in that 3-dimensional vertical space as well. And I just want to shout out that one, there's so many opportunities where we incorporated voice and choice and things like that into this activity, but also this opportunity to go vertical. And what was really interesting for me is we were in a room of social studies and a couple math teachers, and we were all flat in our visualizations. We gave them beads, we gave them sticky notes, and we gave them stickers, and everybody was flat on the map. And there is great opportunities to use all 3 dimensions, right? We have our longitude, we have our latitude for our X and our Y on graphs. And then if we're using manipulatives or different pieces, we can go vertically off of the map into that Z dimension and represent our data. And there are different opportunities that creates for our students to think about the data, engage with the data, wrestle with the data in different ways. If you are interested in more about this, reach out, support@dataspire.org. We are happy to jam with you on your data and where you could leverage manipulatives. Sorry, I should say, we were talking to a room of high school social studies teachers, and it was hopping. The energy was so high and so excited about all these different ideas that everybody had about how we can really invite students into the driver's seat with their data. The other thing that I will say is that after the holiday break, so Wednesday, December 4th, is our next monthly free data strategy share out. And we're going to be talking about where to find data sets. So if you're like, that's great, Kristen, but how do I figure out how to find these data sets that I could use maybe to put into your maps for your class? We talked about, right, also that this could go in a wild, huge number of different directions for our social studies content, also across our science content, of how we can take this principle, this approach, this strategy, and incorporate it across different content areas, rather than this one where we were looking at manufacturing as it relates to, where is it manufactured versus where are we using those items. So if you want to join us, I'll put the link into the comments for our free strategy share out. As I said, the next monthly one is coming up on December 4th, and we're talking about how and where to find good data sets that relate to our curriculum. Would love to see you there. After you have a wonderful Thanksgiving break is my hope for you, and that you get to spend it in ways that are rejuvenating for you and in ways that you want to, and amongst all of the other like family and friends and other components that you might have going on through the rest of this week. Hope you're doing well. Stay curious, keep exploring your data, and I'll see you next week.